Welcome to part 2 of What If Qui Gon survived on Naboo and went on to become the Grand Master of the Jedi Order. Part 1 ended yesterday, go back and check that out, but basically Darth Maul attacked one of the Jedi outposts with his Shadow Collective crime organization, and they're trying to take over the galaxy. So let's get right into it. Part 2, hope you enjoy, here we go. For the last 3 years, Darth Maul has carried a vengeance against the Jedi Order. Since the day he was slain on Naboo, he lay in waste, waiting for someone, anyone to come to his aid. He kept himself alive by diving so deeply into anger, so far into rage, into the dark side, so far that his presence could only be felt by those closest to him. And eventually, the Night Sisters brought Savage Opress, a fellow Zabrak, to full strength in the dark side, and he sought out the distant presence of Maul. Through his anger and his brother, Maul was reborn with the goal of revenge. And for the 3 years since his rescue, Maul waited in the corners of the Outer Rim while the Jedi took over, pushing crime factions away, cutting them off, giving the crime syndicates around the galaxy with nowhere to go, except for Maul. He quickly became a beacon of hope for the criminals that were shut down by the Jedi. Spice traders in the Pike Syndicate, slave owners in Hutt territory, corrupt politicians working with the Black Sun, even a rogue group of Mandalorians called Death Watch were helping Maul. He had no need to take over Mandalore and expose himself, so he instead promised Death Watch control of Mandalore once the Jedi were dead. And in his bringing together the criminal underworld, he discovered Talon, a girl strong in the Force that was never trained in any way. So Maul took her as an apprentice, training her in the dark side, draining any remaining light from her, and making her strong. Together they ruled the criminal underworld, and now they were going to rule the galaxy in due time. For 3 years, Maul brought all of the criminals together on an unoccupied side of Dathomir, building, preparing, seeking out revenge on the Jedi Order. The Republic as a whole was of little concern to the Shadow Collective. They just wanted the Jedi dead so they could have the Outer Rim back for themselves. With all the criminals gathered together, if the Jedi died, everyone in the collective wins, and from there they can pursue further galactic conquest. And after the 3 years, when the Shadow Collective had ample warriors, around 5,000 members, along with a fleet of ships, Maul, his brother Savage, and his apprentice Darth Talon launched an attack on the Jedi outpost in the Outer Rim located on Hoth. The Shadow Collective had been scouting this base for around a year, and they launched the attack once Maul learned that Skywalker, the supposed Chosen One, was there with Master Plo Koon. The plan was to take one outpost, show the Jedi that despite their numbers, they were not trained enough to be warriors that could take this group down. The attack would be a show of force, and while the Jedi Order panics, the Shadow Collective will reclaim the Outer Rim, begin rebuilding what they lost, and in time, as their numbers grew, they would take another outpost, with the Jedi Temple and Coruscant as the end goal. The attack on the Hoth outpost was swift and deadly, and the Jedi outpost had around 1,000 members in it. That number was greatly reduced as the outpost was bombarded by the crime fleet. As the Jedi were scrambling to recover from the bombardment, warriors of countless different species and factions flew down on transports, breaking through the doors before the Jedi knew what hit them. The Shadow Collective had one huge advantage. The Jedi had no clue they were coming. They didn't even know what they were, and a lot of the Jedi were not warriors. They were not trained to be warriors, though they were still powerful. But wave after wave of Syndicate fighters poured in, cutting off all communications out of the outpost, bombing the outpost, killing every Jedi they came across. The Jedi defense was fairly strong. They had the Force on their side, but Death Watch members infiltrated the top levels with their jetpacks, stealing the younglings stationed here, and they threatened to execute them if the Jedi did not stand down. And so every single surviving Jedi, including Anakin and Plo, decided to surrender, save the children, see what the Shadow Collective wanted. Force restraining handcuffs were placed on all of the remaining 100 Jedi, and once they were immobilized, Maul, Talon, and Savage entered the outpost. Maul made eye contact with Anakin and Plo, then ordered the execution of every Jedi except for them. Anakin and Plo could only watch, and moments later Maul answered a call from Qui Gon, as the Grand Master of the Jedi Order learned that Maul returned from the dead, and was now on a mission to destroy the Jedi Order. Back in the temple, Qui Gon was now sitting alone with Yoda, as the two of them didn't know what to say. Everything they just saw was beyond horrific, and now Anakin was being held captive, all alone for some reason. Qui Gon wondered why he was being kept alive, but he had to trust that Anakin would stay alive for longer. For now, Qui Gon had to warn the other two outposts in the core and the mid-rim of what was going on. The Shadow Collective wanted the Outer Rim back, but their aspirations would only continue to grow. Qui Gon knew soon they would expand, and he had to be ready. The Jedi had to be ready, as throughout the galaxy, there were roughly 9,000 remaining Jedi throughout, after the Hoth massacre. But maybe only half of those Jedi were in actual fighting condition. The other half were younglings, Padawans, priests, advisors, teachers. The Jedi Order just didn't have the numbers or the military strategy to compete with the Shadow Collective of around 5,000 bloodthirsty members that Maul has created. Qui-Gon would call an emergency Jedi Council meeting, which now included a very worried Obi-Wan Kenobi, as the council was missing Plo Koon. Luckily, no other council members were on Hoth, and the Jedi began long discussions about what to do about Maul and his Shadow Collective. And all the way inside of the Hoth outpost, Anakin Skywalker was handcuffed and injected with enough drugs to keep him conscious, but very unaware of anything except for his own emotions. He felt despair, sadness, fear, anger, all of the emotions he knew led to the dark side, but he could never let himself become what these monsters were. He swore he would have his revenge for what Maul and the criminals did to his Jedi friends, including Plo Koon, but soon enough, Anakin was thrown into a ray-shield prison where he was hovering, but could not move. From there, Anakin would be tortured by Savage as he tried to extract any information about the Jedi Order out of Anakin that he could. But after days, Anakin still gave up nothing. Despite this, Maul ordered Anakin continue to be kept alive and tortured. Maul could feel a great darkness deep inside of Anakin, and if extracted, he could make an excellent apprentice. And even if Anakin did not fall, the Jedi would not be able to resist trying to come and rescue him, and he would be waiting. During this time, Grand Master Qui-Gon and Master Mace Windu increased the emphasis on Jedi needing to know how to fight, while Shaak Ti, leader of the Mid-Rim Outpost, and Yaddle, leader of the Core Outpost, did the same. Both of these outposts had roughly 1,000 Jedi, while the Coruscant Jedi Temple had the rest, aside from maybe another 1,000, spread across the galaxy on their own missions. Qui-Gon, Mace, Dooku, and Yoda would go to the office of the Chancellor, the newly elected Orn Free Taa, and ask for aid from the Republic militia. Unfortunately, Chancellor Taa was beyond corrupt, threatened and paid off by the Black Sun, led by Maul, to exclude the Jedi from all business with the Republic. So Chancellor Taa told the Jedi that they were on their own, despite how the overall citizens felt in the galaxy. There was nothing the Republic militia could do without jurisdiction from the Chancellor, so the Jedi truly were without an army. Dooku was disgusted with the state of the Republic, and he wondered if the Jedi leaving it alone did more harm than good. The citizens overall seemed to be happier, but the corruption seemed like a ticking time bomb that was beginning to go off. But not everyone in the Republic Senate sided with the Chancellor. A few senators, a group of Jedi sympathizers, led by Padme Amidala and Bail Organa, got together to figure out how to aid the Jedi. Padme and these senators met with the Jedi inside of the Jedi Council and got all of the information. Once they learned of how Maul and the Shadow Collective regained the Outer Rim and would likely pursue further into the galaxy, Padme asked why the Jedi didn't just send everything they had just to the Shadow Collective on Hoth. Qui-Gon said they could likely win in an all-out ground assault, though it would have heavy casualties, but the Shadow Collective had a blockade over Hoth that the Jedi simply could not get through without being decimated. They just didn't have the ships for it. Padme and the Council thought this over, and then she said they may not have the numbers in Jedi, but the Jedi have earned the trust and the respect of the citizens in the Outer Rim. Perhaps if the Jedi go spread throughout the Outer Rim, they can recruit citizens to their cause, recruit them to fight back against the Shadow Collective, earn their freedom back before the Collective can spread to the Mid-Rim and the Core. The senators said that the Shadow Collective would do what they have done for centuries, underestimate the will of the citizens. Qui-Gon and the Jedi said this could work, and so they prepared to send 2,000 capable Jedi to the Outer Rim, asking the citizens to fight. Over the next week, Padme and her group of Jedi sympathizers, along with 2,000 Jedi from Coruscant, would go to the Outer Rim and try to recruit citizens to fight. The citizens were discouraged at first, but a new collective, the Outer Rim Freedom Collective, began to form. Meanwhile, the Shadow Collective led by Maul was spreading across the Outer Rim, threatening to get to the Mid-Rim. Skirmishes between citizens, Jedi, and the Shadow Collective would break out, resulting in lives lost, but nothing too terrible. Luckily, Shaak-Ti and the 1,000 Jedi in the Mid-Rim were able to slow the spread of the Shadow Collective, while the Jedi in the Outer Rim were secretly building their own army of fighters. Eventually, Qui Gon and Padme built up a group of around 50 freed slaves to execute a rescue mission for Anakin Skywalker. Anakin freed them, and now they wanted to do the same for him. There were still many more Outer Rim citizens being recruited, but these were the numbers needed for a smaller rescue. Padme remembered Anakin from when he was first found on Tatooine, and she wondered what he was like at this point. So she boarded a transport where her and the rest of the members were frozen in carbonite for the trip, as the astromech R2-D2 flew the ship to Hoth. To the Shadow Collective, this ship with no readable lifeforms would just be a transport of supplies, and the fleet didn't exactly have the best security in the galaxy, so the plan worked. The transport flew into Hoth, taking a last-second detour to land about a mile away from the outpost, where Anakin was being held. Meanwhile, on Coruscant in the Jedi Temple, Masters Dooku and Mace were met by Senator Bail Organa, leading a group from the Republic Militia. These members told the two Jedi Masters that the Chancellor could not be trusted, and the Republic Militia, a group now of about 2,000 members ready to aid the Republic with enough starships to break through the blockade above Hoth, were willing to fight with the Jedi. Mace and Dooku said this could be treason against the Chancellor, but the militia said the Chancellor seems to be the one working with the criminals. Mace and Dooku, two Jedi Masters who rarely saw eye to eye, could agree on one thing here and now. The Republic was in trouble, but the people wanted to help, so they accepted, and got in contact with the Jedi in the Outer Rim. On Hoth, the rescue group for Anakin timed their mission perfectly after receiving intel that Maul and Talon were off-world, and the 50 members, led by Padme and Qui-Gon, moved through the snow, eventually reaching the outpost. Qui-Gon took the freed slaves to one side of the outpost, creating a distraction while Padme stayed alone on the other side, waiting for her opportunity, and eventually that opportunity came. Qui-Gon and the fighters planted explosives in the Shadow Collective shipyards, setting them off, giving Padme the opportunity she needed. The plan was simple from here. She would rescue Anakin, then the transport would come pick everyone up at a designated location, where they would take off, regroup with the others before their true attack. As this operation was being executed, more Jedi were recruiting citizens across the galaxy, and the momentum was growing, thanks in large part to Obi-Wan, who went to Shmi Skywalker and explained everything. Shmi said that the Outer Rim citizens felt a debt to the Jedi, and she said they had thousands of people with ships ready to fight, once and for all. Shmi and the people of the Outer Rim wanted to save Anakin, keep their freedom, help the Jedi, because they all saved the slaves not long ago. Shmi was helping Obi-Wan build this group, and so momentum to put together this huge freedom collective was well underway. Back on Hoth, Padme moved through the outpost without much trouble, eventually finding a room guarded by a tall Zabrak male with yellowish skin. Savage was pacing around, debating whether to go to the shipyard explosives or not, and eventually he moved away from the door just enough to allow Padme to sprint in behind him, spot Anakin, and shoot the controls that kept him suspended in the air. Padme looked at Anakin. He was bruised, beaten, and he fell to his knees, clearly a bit weak. Padme said they have to leave immediately, but suddenly Savage was standing at the door, double-bladed lightsaber ignited. Anakin looked up and felt adrenaline begin to rush through him. Savage stood in front of him, and Padme was here. Anakin barely recognized her, but he held the same feeling that he did when they met on Tatooine, so long ago. Anakin stood up, getting in front of Padme, taunting Savage with a beckoning motion. Savage smiled, saying he's wanted to do this for a long time, and he ran directly at Anakin. Savage swung upward, but Anakin dodged to the side. Then Savage spun and swung for Anakin's head, but the Jedi ducked underneath with ease. Savage growled, swinging downwards, but again, Anakin took a step back, and Savage took one final swing to kill Anakin, but this time, Anakin grabbed the double-bladed lightsaber with one hand, punched Savage with the other hand, then took Savage's lightsaber from him and decapitated the Sith. He fell dead to the Chosen One, and Anakin took Padme's hand, grabbing his lightsaber, and they began running out of the outpost to find the transport waiting for them. It was a good distance away, a safe distance, and Qui-Gon was helping the final fighters on their side back into the transport, when everything changed. Without warning, a Sith starfighter zoomed from behind a snowy mountain, blasting shots down at Qui-Gon and the transport. Savage must have warned them. Qui-Gon used his lightsaber to deflect the shots back at the ship, critically damaging it before he was blown back away from the transport. So Qui-Gon ordered the transport to get out of here. Luckily, the 50 freed slaves escaped, but the Sith Lords Maul and Talon leapt from their starfighter, landing in front of Qui-Gon. Anakin and Padme still had a good distance to go to get there, and Anakin watched as the transport had to leave them behind. But that was not their biggest worry. Qui-Gon was now engaged in a fierce duel with the two Sith Lords, hell-bent on revenge, and Anakin could only watch as Qui-Gon dueled with Talon and Maul, both wielding double-bladed lightsabers, as Maul spun and unleashed a huge force push, sending Qui-Gon tumbling into Anakin and Padme. Anakin stopped in his tracks, trying to help Grandmaster Qui-Gon to his feet, and from behind Maul and Talon now, countless crime reinforcements lined up, surrounding them. Maul yelled at Anakin and Qui-Gon, saying he would pay for what he did to Savage, and once he is dead, the Shadow Collective, now fully back above Hoth, will spread through the galaxy, killing the Jedi, ruling how they want. Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, looked around him. By his side was Qui-Gon, his master, and Padme, a woman he'd thought about quite often. They were going to die here. But still, he stared daggers at Maul, igniting his lightsaber next to his master, preparing to face down the entire Shadow Collective. They were beaten, broken, exhausted, but willing to die fighting. Anakin was gripping his lightsaber as the entire Shadow Collective prepared to gun him down. But out of nowhere, Anakin felt his comlink beep, and he heard the ever-comforting voice of Obi-Wan say, "Anakin, I hope we're not too late." And everyone turned to look up to the sky as thousands of ships emerged from hyperspace, blasting through the Shadow Collective fleet. Some of them were broken-down vessels from citizens, some were Republic ships, some were Jedi starfighters, but in minutes, the Shadow Collective fleet was scrambling, trying to figure out what was going on. But Anakin understood what was going on. He, as a former slave, understood more than anyone. The citizens had a taste of freedom, and they would do anything to keep it. The galaxy was rallying with the Jedi to take down the Shadow Collective, and as the space battle commenced, Anakin and Qui-Gon ran into battle themselves to face off against Darth Maul and Darth Talon, once and for all. The clash of lightsabers echoed through the frozen air as the two pairs of enemies locked eyes, a silent understanding between them. The fate of the entire galaxy now hung in the balance. Anakin's eyes burned with determination, his blue lightsaber moving with speed and precision, while Qui-Gon's calm demeanor mirrored the intensity of his focused attacks. Maul's double-bladed saber whirled with deadly grace, clashing into the others, a crimson streak against the icy backdrop. Beside him, Talon moved with lethal speed, her acrobatics adding strength to every strike. The battle unfolded with Qui-Gon taking on Maul, as he did so long ago on Naboo, while Anakin took on Talon. Qui-Gon was older and much wiser than that day on Naboo, but he was also weaker, older, while Maul was full of rage and anger. Maul cut through Qui-Gon's saber, then flipped through the air and plunged one end of his saber through Qui-Gon's back. Anakin screamed in anger. He just lost Plo Koon, now Qui-Gon. And Anakin drew on his power, swinging on Talon so hard that her own saber was pushed into her eyes. Blinded now, Anakin flipped through the air, cut her head off mid-flip, then engaged Maul in a duel. Anakin lost his master, Maul lost his apprentice, and now they fought each other. Above them, the sky was a display of chaos. Ships from diverse corners of the galaxy descended upon Hoth, piloted by citizens united against the Shadow Collective. The fleet, cobbled together from various races, factions, engaged in a dogfight against the formidable vessels of the Collective, exchanging blaster fire, fighting for their free lives. The citizens fought valiantly against the darkness that Maul had built, and the Shadow Collective was being pushed into abandonment. Back on the ground, the duel of Jedi versus Sith unfolded with ferocity. Anakin's strikes were fueled by the emotions within him. Maul could feel his anger, hatred, darkness. And the fight wore on, both combatants pushing themselves to their limits. Anakin's strength in the Force, his mastery of lightsaber combat began to tip the scales. He was transitioning between offensive flurries, defensive maneuvers, gradually gaining ground on Maul. And as the duel reached its climax, Anakin tapped deep into the well of his emotions, channeling the inner turmoil that defined him. With a surge of power, he cut one half of Maul's saber, and Maul fell to his knees. Anakin spun and slammed his saber down on Maul again and again, each time with more anger, until Maul had to drop the other half, accepting his death as Anakin Skywalker touched into the darkness. But as Anakin raised his saber again for the killing blow, he looked to the near distance and saw the Force ghosts of Qui Gon and Plo Koon behind Maul. They didn't say a word, but Anakin now realized he had to carry their legacy of the light side through himself. And so he swung down, only cutting off the hands of Maul, then using the Force to knock the Sith Lord out. Not killing him, staying in the light. And the last thing Maul saw was the 3 largest ships in his fleet go up in flames. Anakin fell to the ground, and his 2 Jedi Masters says he has done well before disappearing. In the aftermath of the battle, the Shadow Collective became nothing more than a memory. They underestimated the people of the galaxy, and their Outer Rim takeover was stopped. Maul was arrested, brought to the Jedi Temple prison on Coruscant, where he would forever be locked away. And the Jedi would mourn the loss of their Grand Master and many other members in these battles, slain by the Sith and the Collective. And in time, the Jedi Order would not name just one new Grand Master, but instead they would name 5 equal ones, one for each sector: Shaak Ti in the Mid-Rim, Yaddle for the Core Worlds, Kit Fisto in the Outer Rim, Obi-Wan Kenobi for the Coruscant Jedi Temple, with the aid of Yoda. And a new role was created, one that Mace Windu and Master Dooku would share, with Windu being the official Grand Master of the new faction of Republic Jedi, while Dooku was elected as the new Chancellor, as a vote of no confidence went into effect for Chancellor Ormfrey Ta, and a Jedi took over. The light side of the Force would reign supreme over the galaxy, keeping the people safe, and the Jedi would aim to be keepers of the peace with the support of the galaxy. And of course, Anakin Skywalker would pursue a secret relationship with Padme Amidala. And folks, that's the end of part 2. Let me know what you thought. I really enjoyed this story from part 1 to part 2. Definitely my longest one in a long time if you put together the 2 parts, about 43 minutes total. So, damn. Hope you enjoyed. Yeah. What video do you want to see next? It'll be coming out probably Thursday, though that's Thanksgiving. I'll have to make the video. We'll see. We'll see when the next video comes out. But either way, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.